Today on Politics Unplugged, a familiar name in Arizona politics is one step closer to Congress. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego wades into the controversy surrounding disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. And the political blame game heats up over the fire that torched the north rim of the Grand Canyon and destroyed a landmark hotel. Our panel breaks it all down now on Politics Unplugged. Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. There was a national focus on the Democratic primary in District 7, with speculation that newcomer Deja Fox would pull an upset win. But in the end, Adelita Grijalva won the primary in a landslide with a chance to fill the seat of her late father in the heavily Democratic district. I spoke with Grijalva about the race and what she expects if she wins the special election. I want to thank you for joining us here today. First of all, I want to say congratulations on the big victory on Tuesday night. But let's start with the fact that that had to be a bit bittersweet. I mean, you pull off this victory, you take a step closer to Congress, but it's also the reason this is happening is because we're trying to replace your father. And you were taking a step to replace your father, who served the district for over 2 decades in Congress. His name, it was a staple down there, and he was your dad. Talk to us a little bit about that.
You know, we're never going to be able to replace him. He's not someone we're going to be able to replicate. But you know, he was a champion for this community his entire life, 50 years in elected office, and he was here all the time. So that is the lesson that I took from him, is that if you're going to do something like represent community, you need to be sure that you're always there. And so, you know, we were hearing a lot of craziness about, well, it's a very close race and there's within the margin of error. But we were going door to door in communities that are like, I've always voted Grijalva. I'm going to vote Grijalva. I voted for your dad and I voted for you, and I'm going to vote for you again, because I'm a teacher at a school and you come every year and read to our kids. Or your dad helped my mom get all of her immigration paperwork done, and now we're not having to worry about what's going on with ICE because your dad stepped up and always has. So it is a thing about being established in your community. And so what I thought was an incredible mischaracterization of my dad and of me, but of my dad, is when, you know, they were calling him the establishment. Like, he's established in the community, as am I. But unless you said Raul Grijalva fights against the establishment, that's the only time that establishment and Grijalva were in the same sentence. And so I wanted to make sure to remind people, nationally, that this is not that kind of race. This is not New York City. This is Southern Arizona. And we work campaigns, and just like we do constituent services, door to door and talking.
Yeah, and you know, I can say too, your father was always a member of the progressive caucuses and took up those types of issues. And you mentioned trying to remind people nationally that this was Southern Arizona and whatnot. I know you said that you were just putting your head down and ignoring all the noise out there, but that had to be kind of hard because of the closing days of this race. One of your opponents was getting a lot of attention. And in fact, like the day before the election, there were headlines saying that this person could be on her way to Congress, yet you cruised to victory. First of all, let's start with what you kind of hit on some of this. What was the issues? What separated you from the rest of the field?
The issues, policy, talking about what we're going to do in Congress, that was the difference. We always focused on policy, not about personality. I was the 29-year-old person running for school board for the first time, and everyone was incredibly dismissive of me, and, you know, she's a girl. So I have never participated in knocking other people down because of their personalities, about their individuality, like who they are as a person. I think that that's off limits. And the way this race got towards the end, what I've noticed in other races, and like when you're running for office, is that when you are stressed, it shows, you show cracks in the character, right? Like you get angry, things happen, you get upset. And when you're a mom, like I am, I always think about being a good example for my kids or this community, for someone that people can look up to. And so I really tried very hard to focus on what was at stake. And it is making sure that Southern Arizona is not lost in this national conversation about what people thought was happening. So what I would encourage outlets that are not part of this community, do your homework on what the race is really about. Because what that did, I think, nationally is really motivated people to get out and vote. They're like, oh no, I'm voting for Adelita. And so we did have a higher than usual turnout. We knocked on 40,000 doors. We made 320,000 phone calls. We had 1,400 volunteers. I mean, and I am the most progressive candidate, period. And so the assassination, sort of like trying to assassinate my record or my character, that didn't work. And my hope is that we take that as an example nationally, that focus on how you're going to be a different leader. I think that is completely respectable and honorable. Giving people an option in a Democratic primary, I think, is incredibly healthy. It really is. It makes everyone sort of step it up. And in this case, it made me fight, and all of us fight in this campaign for what we really wanted.
It is expected that you will likely win the general election because the district leans so far left. If you do win the general election, have you given some thoughts about how do you challenge the current administration? You're one of 435 members of the House. You're one of just over 200 Democrats. How does Congresswoman Grijalva stand up and challenge this administration?
It's the same way that many of our members of Congress have challenged. You fight against every rider, you fight against every bit of legislation. I mean, this attack on our public broadcasting system, it just sort of seems as what we have established as a nation as safeguards and safety nets for communities are being dismantled one at a time. And this administration is making us fight for our democracy and our right to exist. And I am an incredible advocate for the communities that I represent, but also those that are marginalized and left out of conversations. I mean, when you look at the representation in Congress, 2% of women in Congress are Latina, less are Mexican American, and having the Southern Arizona district that has all three ports of entry with Mexico, I am going to be a loud advocate for comprehensive immigration reform and fighting against what Trump is doing with ICE here in our communities, because I've seen them firsthand. But you also, 7% of all of the women in Congress, only 7% are moms with children that are school-age children. And I think that perspective is valuable and important. And, I spent 20 years as an elected but volunteer board member on Tucson Unified School Board. And I think that every person that is running for office and any other higher office really needs to have a fundamental understanding of why public education should be a nonpartisan issue.
All right, we'll have to end it right there. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your day. Good luck on the rest of this campaign, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
And I'm bringing in our panel to talk about all of this week's major headlines, including an Arizona senator joining the calls to release the Epstein Files. That's next on Politics Unplugged. Here's this week's political roundup. A quick look at the top stories making headlines in Arizona, starting with disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein.
No more shady cover-ups. If there is any evidence of a cover-up in the Epstein case, the public has a right to know. If there is a list, the public deserves to see it. And Americans deserve to see the truth, even if it's not what Donald Trump and his elite friends want.
Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego jumped into the controversy surrounding the convicted sex offender who hanged himself in jail. Arizona's junior senator introduced a resolution demanding the Justice Department release the so-called Epstein Files.
The costs are going to be higher and the supplies are going to be less reliable.
Concerns that Donald Trump's latest tariff will hit the American consumer where it hurts, the pocketbook. On Monday, the administration announced it was adding a 17% tax on most of the tomatoes imported from Mexico. Politicians from both sides of the aisle are now demanding answers about the federal government's response to the Dragon Bravo fire on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The blaze destroyed dozens of structures, including a historic landmark hotel. And change is finally coming to the Arizona Democratic Party. After months of bitter infighting, rank-and-file Democrats voted to fire Chairman Robert Branscombe just 6 months after he easily won the job. And here to talk about all of that, Republican consultant Jaime Molera and Democratic consultant Adam Kinsey. Thanks for being here. Let's start with the Epstein Files. First of all, you're the Democrat here. Why is Ruben Gallego weighing into this controversy, which has been something Republicans and Trump supporters have been talking about for a long time? What is Senator Gallego up to?
I mean, this is a bipartisan issue. Wanting a little transparency here is not about party. It's about let's just get this done and move on. We've been sold for years that there are some smoking guns here, and Pam Bondi said the file was on her desk. We had the White House invited the right-wing blogosphere out, and they all got binders of, I don't know, takeout menus or something in them. And so we're just asking for a little bit of transparency here. We are being gaslit, and I hate using the word gaslit.
Okay.
We are absolutely being gaslit by this administration. What do you mean the Epstein Files? Who said the Epstein Files were important? You did! For the last decade, you've based most of your candidacy on things like this, and now that it looks like it might be coming to light, now it's time to look the other way.
And so what is going on here? Because, you know, it was blocked. Ruben's motion was blocked in the Senate by Republicans. What's happening here? Because Adam is right. I mean, a lot of Republicans have been talking about this issue, including the top Republican, President Trump.
Well, in less than a year ago, the roles were reversed, right? The Republicans were saying the Biden administration is hiding everything from us, and we want transparency. We want this out there, and now it's flipped. It's quintessential Washington politics. But you know, the Republicans are going to do everything they can, candidly, to protect the president. If there's issues there that might be misconstrued or something that could damage him, last thing they want is for this episode to continue and linger on going into 26.
Yeah, that seems like a problem is for the Trump administration, is that this will not go away.
Right.
Is there anything that the president can do to make it go away at this point?
Well, they're trying. They're trying. The president came out and said anything that's pertinent, right? Whatever that means, whatever's pertinent needs to be released. So I think they're going to come out, my opinion, in fairly soon with some documentation that says, well, see, there's no there there. But it's not going to tamper down this attention, especially from the Democrats. Democrats see red meat, and there's a reason why Ruben Gallego's making this a huge issue, and I think he's going to continue that path.
And are Democrats doing a good job on using this issue as a political wedge issue? Are they overplaying their hand? Could they be, giving Donald Trump some runway to get off this story?
I certainly hope they're not going to overplay their hand. I think identifying it, hey, we need these reports made public. Senator Gallego trying to get a vote out of it, I think that's a good move. But now I think we should probably back away from it. This should not be a story that we push. This should be a story that everybody pushes, including Republicans. And I read a survey that 36% of Republicans are upset with the way President Trump is handling this issue. 36% of Republicans, 69% of Americans think that he's handling it incorrectly, but 36% of Republicans, that presents a huge problem when you need to inspire and excite that MAGA base to come out for these midterms. And right now he's absolutely playing it the wrong way. And he's doing it. A lot of this has to do with vanity, honestly. Trump makes the worst decisions when he's up against the wall and when he feels his own ego is being hurt or threatened. He did this with the Stormy Daniels incident, and that's eventually what led to his felony convictions, and he's doing it now. He's not thinking as clearly, as strategically, which I know is, It's debatable whether or not he does that in general, but he is absolutely going with his gut, and his gut is wrong. He's handling this so poorly that he's upsetting his base, and that's going to really hurt him.
And let's talk about the latest story we saw with the Wall Street Journal. Even though Donald Trump has tried to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein, there is a new story out from the Wall Street Journal that he had signed some birthday cards, and shows a much closer connection to Epstein than the president has been saying as of late. Is this a problem for him?
Well, I would agree that the way they handle this and the way they communicate this, it can be a problem for them. But going back to what you mentioned about Stormy Daniels, how many people remember that story anymore? I mean, that was a massive story, but yet, so the American public's attention span sometimes doesn't last that long.
He's made it Teflon.
But you have over a year until the next election, but I would agree if they don't handle this the right way and they don't communicate and they don't at least offer some things that are credible, then I think the story is going to continue, and that's the problem for this administration.
That's a fair comparison. I understand why you're making it with Stormy Daniels and the public forgetting about that. I think Jeffrey Epstein and those atrocities are on a much different level than Stormy Daniels. Sex with a porn star and covering that up is a little different than Epstein, so I think this has a lot more legs.
But it goes on both ways. I mean, the Democrats for 4 years when they controlled the Senate and the presidency didn't do anything either. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but at some point, I think the public does need, and I would agree with Senator Gallego, the public has the right to that kind of transparency, especially for something as heinous as these kinds of crimes.
Yeah, it just does seem, it seems really interesting how the roles have been reversed. That, a year ago, as I was pointing out, as Republicans demanding these files, and now the Democrats are demanding these files. Is there any, potential blowback, unintended consequences of demanding these files be released?
I can't imagine there is. I mean, the idea that Merrick Garlick didn't make an overly political maneuver out of this is not shocking. Much to the chagrin of a lot of Democrats, I think. He's a little cautious on these things. But if that's your defense for being all over the Epstein files, presumably, if your defense is, well, they sat on it for 4 years, I mean, that dog won't hunt. Like that's not as good enough defense. Like if the underlying issue is still that you are very much involved in this guy and his horrific dealings, then it's going to come out and no one's really going to care who sat on what. It's just going to be what's the end result. All
right, we're going to have to take a quick break, but when we come back, the calls for answers about the government's response to a fire that burned a historic lodge at the Grand Canyon when Politics Unplugged continues. To get more in-depth on the issues, check out the Politics Unplugged podcast. This week, Jaime and Adam are going to join us in the podcast studio to continue this conversation. The Politics Unplugged podcast drops every Sunday evening wherever you get your podcasts. And let's talk about the fire at the North Rim, where people are asking why the Park Service fire's response wasn't more aggressive before it destroyed a historic lodge up there on the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. We've seen a lot of Democrats, even Republicans now joining from Arizona, want to know what's going on.
Well, and it really didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, this fire was started by lightning, and then the Forest Service made the decision, a conscious decision, to then let it be a controlled burn. And then the wind kicked up and then all heck broke loose. And now it's zero contained. So I think it's the confluence of a couple of issues. I think there's some concern that a lot of the reductions to the Forest Service could have played a part. I think that while that might be part of it, it's also a tough area to get to. It's really difficult, that area of the north of the Grand Canyon. But then the other piece of this is that it's starting to get talked about now is a lot of the policies over the years that have not allowed for thinning of our forests. And that's always been a big issue in our state. When we don't allow for that to happen, then you have a lot of fuel. And unfortunately, we've had some incredibly dry summers, and we're seeing it now. And when you combine that with the forests that are not thinned, you can have some disasters like this.
Okay, and it's one thing, it's a federal response. It's one thing for Democrats like Governor Katie Hobbs, Senators Gallego and Kelly to be calling for investigations and to find out what happened. Were you surprised to learn that Republican Congressman Paul Gosar and Eli Crane were joining this call? I'm
delighted is a word I think I would use. the Grand Canyon should be nonpartisan. Protecting, our signature landmark should be nonpartisan, and asking questions is very appropriate. I mean, and you're right, there are all kinds of questions. Do we need to do a better job of thinning, which is something that has been a little controversial over the years? But overall, I think asking these questions is appropriate. We need to not jump to conclusions yet. Let's actually find out what happened, because overall, what you have is an administration who puts somebody who, let's just say, is very friendly with the oil industry as the Secretary of the Interior. Not exactly somebody who's got a lot of forestry management experience under their belt. You're cutting by tens of thousands the number of people that work at the Department of the Interior, Forestry, even National Weather Service. All these different places are having big, irreversible cuts made to them. When you shrink government to this size, things are going to fall through the cracks. And that is, we're seeing the chickens come home to roost on these small government guys, the Grover Norquist line. We want to shrink government to the size where we can drown it in the bathtub. Well, here it is, and the results are not great.
All right, let's pivot now. Let's talk a little bit about that congressional race in southern Arizona. Were you surprised that Adelita Grijalva won by such a wide margin? I mean, given the fact that there was so much national media attention given to Deja Fox because of her social media presence and whatnot. I mean, the day before the election, I believe there's a headline in Politico said the young influencer that could be on her way to Congress. I
think even Grijalva was calling it fake news. I think they were a little bit upset about all the attention she was getting nationally. But at the end of the day, candidates and good organizations win. And certainly the Grijalva machine, and it is a machine down in southern Arizona, has been around for a long time. She definitely benefited from her father's name, but also her experience in working with the Grijalva family, working in Democrat politics in southern Arizona. So she really was a formidable candidate.
All right, and what did, I know you're going to love this question, but what did the national media not understand about the politics in southern Arizona?
I don't know what you're talking about. Clearly they nailed every bit of it. It's a special election, so there's not a lot else going on in terms of let's go find a horse race to look at. So I think they just jumped at a lot of stories and didn't quite understand the district, didn't quite understand the dynamics. 600,000 TikTok users is a very impressive account.
Yes.
How many of them are in AZ7? She spent a lot of money on Facebook advertising, 5% of which was inside the state of Arizona. So I mean, she had a very good national press campaign, and she was able to manipulate or at least use national media to really increase her campaign, and it was really impressive to see. But at the end of the day, the Grijalva machine is the phone tree that they use, the week of, hey, we're phone banking. Okay, there's 200 people that just show up for an Adelita, phone banker neighborhood canvas. So that's the machine, and that's going to beat national think pieces and influencing and all that.
Yeah.
I think Deja is a really interesting candidate, and I hope that she does something else in the party. But Adelita, that is absolutely earned.
The next mayor of New York.
Oh man, that's what everybody thought was going to follow in those footsteps. And let's end on another one of Adam's favorite topics: the mess over at the Arizona Democratic Party. The Republicans have already gone through all of this stuff.
I haven't seen this kind of acrimony and this kind of infighting. It's been about 2 years when the Republicans went through this with Kelly Ward, and Doug Ducey took all of the funds, put it in Yuma County, and did the exact same thing. The thing I found kind of amusing were all these press releases from the Democrat leadership saying how they chose Navajo County and how great that organization is. It's like they're not going to spend a dime of that money. They're just going to park it there for Democrat leaders to say, okay, this is how we're going to spend this money.
Yeah, Republicans led the way on that. They showed they cut the path for that. The Democrats are going to be following.
Sean McCain's a trailblazer. I love it.
We're going to have to end it right there. You're lucky on that one, so we'll have to continue this over on the podcast there. That is all the time we have. Be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.